Hello everybody, and welcome to the most comprehensive tutorial on mapping in make.com available on the internet. Over the course of the next few minutes, you're going to learn everything you need to know about mapping to get out there and start crushing your own scenarios. I'm going to cover edge cases, I'll cover a little bit of the theory behind it, and essentially this is just going to be the end-all be-all, the only video you have to watch in order to understand this concept fully. First things first, there are only two things that you need to know about the map function in make.com before we dive into the scenario. The first is a very simple mnemonic that I use anytime that I am mapping. The mnemonic goes like this. From A, I need B, where C is equal to D. I understand that if you're not familiar with the map function or really mnemonics in general, this may seem like pointless to you, but I assure you, if you just memorize this one sentence, mapping gets extraordinarily easy, as I will drill into your head over the course of the next 15 or 20 minutes. The second thing is that mapping only works on arrays. It does not work on other data types. One of the most common questions that I get in my make.com community is, hey, why is this map function not working? And I inevitably will see that it is being used on a collection or maybe an object or just some data type that is not an array. So mapping is an array function, an incredibly potent and powerful array function at that, but it is an array function. It's not a collection function. It's not, an object function. It only works on arrays. As long as you have these two things in mind, and I will be running through the first one again and again and again over the course of the next 5 scenarios, you will be fine and you will understand mapping. Okay, so let's actually get into building this out in real scenarios. I have a map playground set up over here with 5 different modules, and each of these 5 modules are going to be basically like a test. What we're going to do is we're going to solve all of these tests, all of these tasks, with mapping, and I'll show you just how easy mapping makes all of this, makes it extraordinarily straightforward. Now I've set these up here instead of just put them in 5 different scenarios for simplicity. My goal is I will make this available to you as a blueprint later on, and then you can just go to the video description and then download this blueprint. If you want to play around with this, if you want to redo some of these examples here just for your own learning, feel free. The purpose of this is for you to know everything you need to know about mapping. Okay, so what are these parse JSON modules? Well, I'm not going to get super far into that because it's beyond the scope of this discussion, but essentially this is just a quick and easy way for us to generate data structures with arrays in them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to unlink all of the rest of these array items, and then I'm just going to focus on this one, which is our first test or our first task, which is subscriptions with status equal pending. And let me show you what I mean by that. If I right click and then press run module, and then I zoom in here to the data structure that's output, you'll see that this is an array. And this array contains 5 collections or 5 items in the array. There's item 1, item 2, item 3, item 4, and item 5. And inside of every item, we have an email address, then we have a subscription status, then we have a full name, and then that's our item. We have 3 keys essentially with 3 values. Now, hypothetically, let's say instead of 5 items, because I just did 5 items as an example, this array had 500 items. And we wanted to select the item inside of this array, specifically wanted to extract the email address for the item that had a subscription status equal to pending. Maybe we're building a big email blast for a client or something like that. And we need to only be sending these to people with subscription status pending. And for whatever reason, we don't have access to this data right now. We're getting it in Make. We can just very quickly run very simple and straightforward map operation that makes use of our mnemonic to get it. The reason why mapping is so powerful is it's not necessarily powerful when you have 5 items like this, because you could see who is subscription status pending. It's this good fellow Bob Marley here, really isn't paying his bills. But if you have an object with 500 items, it takes you the exact same amount of work to solve this problem for an array with 5 items versus an array with 500 versus an array with 50,000 versus an array with 5 million. You only have to write the string of code or make.com, no code logic basically once, and then it just solves that problem for you forever. And it also just allows you to do things in flows that otherwise might have taken you 20 or 30 different modules to do, or just takes away makes your flows a lot more flexible. Like, we could theoretically index this array and only get the 3rd result, right? But that would require us knowing in advance that Bob Marley has a subscription status of pending and is the 3rd result. What if we add somebody new to this array? Well, now we got to basically go back in time, do all this over again. And so mapping just allows you to eliminate that and just be so much faster. And it's something that I do on a daily basis to solve problems that people mention in my community and more specifically my clients. So let's actually give this a go and let's actually see how we would map this in practice. I'm just going to move this up here because it's going to make our lives a little bit easier in a moment. And then I'm going to use a tool module called set variable. I'm going to drag that up here, connect it, and I'm just going to call this our tester. Our tester is going to be where we're going to put in all of the mapping logic. The variable name for tester, I'm just going to call this, well, let's actually think about our problem statement here. Our problem is that we want to extract email addresses with subscription status equal to pending. So why don't I just call this pending emails? I'm using camel case. That is just where every word after the first is capitalized with the first letter, but the first isn't. I guess that's why it kind of looks like a camel, because the camel's head is down here and then the bump is up there. This is just like a naming convention. You could, put an underscore if you wanted or whatever. I just personally do this because I used to do software development and I was just a big into JavaScript, which typically uses camel case. Anyway, let's actually go into this variable value and let's run through our mapping function. So in order to instantiate the map function, I just type map and then a little left bracket, and it'll automatically pull it from the array value. You can also go back to this array function list, and then you could specifically select map. It'll add that little semicolon for you and then add that right bracket. I'm just going to do it faster because I think it's faster like this. And keep in mind, you can do this for any function in make.com. If it's a function, the second that you put this little left bracket after the verbiage, it will pop up in this little gray box. If you try and do this with like keywords, like empty array, it wouldn't work, which is why if you wrap them in 2 curly brackets each on the left side, the left curly bracket, the right side, the right curly bracket, you can also make that variable pop up. But if you don't do that, the variable is not going to pop up. What I'm talking about right now only applies to functions. So anyway, for maps specifically, remember earlier we had that mnemonic, right? And that was from A, I want B where C is equal to D. Well, let me show you how simple it is to extract the data that we want from this in 1 second. The way that mapping works is from A is the array. Everything after the array, you need to just write out in text, not as a variable. So from A, I want B, aka I want email, where subscription status is equal to pending. That's our map function. This piece of logic essentially does exactly what I just wanted it to a moment ago. And this piece of logic is capable of basically going out and getting hundreds of thousands of pending records and filtering through thousands and thousands and thousands of different email addresses if we needed to. Now, in our case, we only needed 5, and you see it found the email address, Bob Marley, the fly on my microphone, interestingly enough, bobmarley@example.net. But this works for literally anything. This works for any arbitrary length of array. And it also works for any other value that we want. You know how earlier we said email? Well, what if instead of the email, we just wanted the full name? If you just write full name instead of email, if you just replace the B in our mnemonic with full name, and you run this again, you see that now instead of it saying Bob Marley@example.net, it says Bob Marley's full name. So we can change the values that we want to extract, and we can also change the criteria of the variables that we are looking to pull. So maybe instead of pending, what if we want active? I'm just going to replace that with active plus run once. Well, voila, now we have 3 because there were 3 entries with subscription status set to active: John Doe, Alice Wonder, and Xavier the Great. So hopefully this seems pretty straightforward. And the purpose of this is to make this seem as unintimidating to you as possible as we slowly ramp up the complexity in mapping. But at least at the initial example, as long as you use that mnemonic from A, I want B where C is equal to D, you can just repeat that back and forth in your head and rock yourself forward while hugging a pillow in a straitjacket. And eventually you'll figure out how mapping works. God damn, my dad jokes are out of control. Anyway, so that's subscriptions with status equal pending. That's our very first example. Now, why don't we put this away, stick that in the corner where it belongs, then we're going to go grab emails by user location equals Morocco. I'm sure you guys can kind of guess what this is going to be doing. This is going to be doing a relatively similar example. It's just instead of getting emails with subscription status equal to pending, we're going to be grabbing emails by the user location. Let's actually run this and let's see what pops up. So if I go to the output, which is the important part here, and I zoom in, you'll see that this is an array with 5 objects again. Except these objects look a little bit different. Previously, we had first name, full name, and then we had email, and then we had subscription status, I think. Now we have first name, last name, email, city, and country. And we do this again for all 5 objects. And I think that the name of the module makes it pretty self-explanatory. But hypothetically, let's just say our project for the day was we needed to pull out all of the email addresses with country equal to Morocco. That's what we need. Maybe, again, we're sending an email campaign or something like that, or we're filtering out to do something maybe specific to people that live in Morocco. How exactly, would we go about doing that in make.com using mapping? Well, it is the exact same thing. All we have to do is use our mapping formula, which is map. And then from array, I want email where country, I clicked on it this time. I shouldn't have. Just going to write country is equal to Morocco. And now I'm going to run this whole flow and let's see what our result is. Now, I didn't change the title here. It still says pending emails, but I think you guys still get my point. We have Jane at example.com and Fatima at example.ma. Fun fact that I learned a few minutes ago, MA is just the Morocco top-level domain name. So that's pretty neat. Like in Canada here, the Great White North, we have .ca, and I guess they have .ma. I wonder why more people in the United States don't use the .us domain name. Just because they have to dominate everything. Anyway, so yeah, that's that. Let's hypothetically say instead of countries, Morocco, we want cities. And we want the city to be equal to New York. Well, all I do is I grab the city, and then I believe it was just new space York. So I'm going to give that a try. Press OK, and then let's press run once. Let's see what happens. Yeah, we got John at example.com because John lives in New York as per this data structure. If you're wondering what this is just the string that I had to feed this module in order to generate this example for us. It's not hyper relevant to us. This is the more relevant portion down here. But let's just look for John. Yeah, there you go. We got a John Doe over here with the city of New York. We could do the same thing for first names. We could do the same thing for last names. We could do the same thing for example, emails. And if you're wondering, which is my logical question at this point, why are you only pulling out the emails? Why are you pulling out the first name and the last name? Well, I'll show you a quick little trick that you could use in a subsequent example where you can actually pull out multiple. You pull out each of them individually, and then you just stick multiple of them back together using the multiple variables module. So that's our second example, which is again quite straightforward. No magic here, as you see. As long as you have that mnemonic down, you will understand mapping. What I'm going to do is I'm going to unlink the second example, stick this over here, unlink this, and then voila, we're now looking at a third example. And the purpose of this third example is to slowly ramp up the complexity a little bit and show you how this might look like if you, instead of just trying to get one item, so instead of just trying to get, let's say, like email addresses, you're trying to get a few simultaneously from an array instead. Let me show you what I mean. Well, if I right-click this and press Run Module once, minimize this big input array, and then if I zoom into this data, you'll see that our input array now looks like this. We have a first name, then we have a last name, then we have an email, then we have a type, and then we have an array full of interests, hiking, photography, and cooking. Now, hypothetically, let's say you had sort of like a data example, and you were interested in finding the interests of people that have high ticket sales types. So maybe this is a list of customers in your database. You, for some reason, tracked interests, and you're looking to grab the interests of people that only have the type high ticket. You're not interested in people with like Emma here, who's low ticket. Who cares about Emma? You only want people like Olivia and Tom and Sarah who are high ticket. And our goal is to basically get this big list of interests of people that have that type equals high ticket. So how would you actually go about doing this? Well, it's really not any more difficult or different from what we've done so far. Let's just call this variable user interests. Let me zoom in here and show you how you do this in practice. So this is our array structure here on the right? Well, you just do the same thing. You map from array. I want interests. Sorry, I'm just adding a space here because I have a little keyboard macro that automatically adds a bunch of text. Now, if you're wondering where I get this string interest from, I mean, why would I put interest here if this interest has like these two little left or right brackets? The way to know what the variable name is to reference in mapping is you just mouse over the little purple variable picker, and then you look in that little pop-up. As you see, it says interests, and then there's a little array thing immediately to the right of it. And then underneath it says raw, and then it says interests. Well, that raw section, that is the raw text that refers to that variable, and that's what you put in here. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's go back and do our mnemonic. From array, I want interests where type is equal to high ticket. That's that. Quite straightforward. Let's give this a run and see what happens. All right, so we have a user interests array, and you'll see we've pulled out 3 different sub-arrays, and each of these arrays has hiking, photography, cooking, gaming, technology, entrepreneurship, fashion, beauty, travel. These are our lists of interests for everybody that had a type high ticket. Now I'm going to throw something else in here that I didn't talk about in the video description, but map isn't the only valuable array function. There are a variety of valuable array functions. And one very valuable one that I find myself using every now and then is called flatten. And so if you look at this array structure here, we basically have 3 arrays all embedded inside of another array called user interests. Well, if we flatten these arrays, if we flatten the top array, what we're basically going to be doing is we're just going to be pulling all of these array objects out into one master array. And maybe that's valuable because you just want to, I don't know, pump this out into an email to send to somebody for tracking purposes or data or something. I don't know. But if we feed this into another array function called flatten, and we give that another run, we'll see that now we just have a list of 9 user interests. So there are going to be some edge cases where stuff like this is required for you, other edge cases where it's not really. But flatten and map, I use these reasonably often in my own life, along with just running through here. I use reverse every now and then. I use slice. I'll do deduplicate pretty often. Sometimes I'll use first and last. That's about it off the top of my head. But okay, great. That's example number 3. And as you can see, these are slowly increasing in complexity in terms of the data that we're trying to grab. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to jump up a complexity quite a bit, and we're going to target a more challenging example. And this example is going to be grabbing emails by role permissions. And the reason why this is going to be a more complicated example is because this is going to require us to use nesting keys and values. We're essentially going to have to index things. Now, if you're curious what that means, let's just give this model a run. Let's zoom in and let's see what the data structure looks like. So as the title here probably suggests, we're looking for emails, and we're looking to get specific emails that have a role permission that is not read. Basically, they're not allowed to read. What does this mean in practice? Well, we have a first name, then a last name, then an email, then a role, and then down here we have a collection of permissions. Read, false, write, true, delete, true. This is Sophia Rossi, who has permissions read true, write true, delete false. This is Jacob Nakamura, which has read true, write false, delete false. And this is so low I can't even scroll. Olivia Sanchez and Benjamin Anderson. All right, so essentially what we're looking to do is we're just looking to pull, let's just say, the email address of somebody whose permission is equal to false, essentially, who's not true. And I think there's only one person in this list, so we're probably going to be we're looking for Liam. Again, if you imagine this was a list or an array with 5,000 entries, this might be a little bit more valuable to you off the top of your head. But I just want to show you guys in a way that where I can actually run through all of these elements, make things very interpretable for you. The question here, and the big thing that's different from our previous example, is notice how instead of us just looking for an object, or instead of us just looking for a key and a value pair, this is actually nested. We have another collection called permissions, and inside of permissions, we have read false. So we basically have to go one level deeper. That's okay. This normally trips up a lot of people, but I'll show you, and again, a very simple and easy way that you never have to be tripped up by this again. So what I'm going to be looking for is I'll just saying false read emails. Let's just do that. And then let me make some space here and then zoom in so we could see exactly what's going on with this array object. That's funny. Exactly what's going on with this array. So you see it's array, first name, last name, email, role, permissions, read, write, delete. So what we really want is we want entries where read is set to false. And the data I'm going to be pulling out is going to be the email. So I want emails where that is set to false. No problem. Let's just use our mnemonic. We're going to map from array. And then what we want to pull is from array, I want emails. So I'm going to go email. And then, sorry, that's my little thing here that instantly pops up my my email address, nicholasdrive@gmail.com. Don't send me nicely written letters. So from A, I want B, where C is equal to D, right? So where read is equal to D. The question is, how do we actually get read? Well, it's really simple. In make.com, the way that things work is If you have a collection, you're trying to get a key within the collection, you just have to write the parent key dot the child key. So I would, in this case, write permissions dot read. The way that I know this is I moused over permissions, I saw the raw, it said permissions, and then I moused over read, and I saw the raw, it said read. So from array, I want email where permissions.read are equal to, and what are we looking for? We're looking for false. So I'm just going to type false in there. And now let's give that a run. Let's see what happens. And as you see, we pulled out Liam at example.com. And if you guys remember, Liam was the only one who had the read set to false in that case. But we could try something different. Maybe instead of permissions.read is false, maybe we want permissions.read is true. How about that? Let's give that a try. What do you guys expect is going to happen here? Well, we're probably going to pull 4 people out, right? And we did. Sophia, Jacob, Olivia, Benjamin. Of the 5, these 4 had read set to true. But why don't we try looking for another thing that we could do? Maybe instead of permissions.read, we want permissions.delete, right? So why don't we try that? Let's go permissions.delete. And we want permissions.delete is equal to true. So let's give that a run. So you see here, we got 1 because it was only Liam whose permissions.delete was set to true. Now let me do something else. I'm going to write and make this an even more complex, more contrived example because I want to show you guys how deep we can go here. What if there was a second permissions object? And inside of second permissions, you had x equal to true. I believe that'll be right. If not, I am dumb. Let's give this a run. Okay, awesome. So now we have 2 objects. And what I have to do in order to make this example actually relevant is I just have to go through each of these. Then I have to write the second permissions, x is equal to true, x is equal to true, x is equal to true, and then x is equal to true. And let's make this one false, and let's make that one false. Let's just give this a run here. Okay, great. I think everything was fine here. Looks like it. So now, hypothetically, let's try and nest one level deeper. Let's say here inside of permissions and then second permissions, what we're looking for is we only want to pull the emails of records where permissions.secondpermissions.x is equal to false. Probably seems like a mouthful, right? But it's okay. As long as we follow the same structure that we had before, we'll be fine. Let's zoom in on our array structure here. And then let's use our mnemonic. So from array, I want email where permissions, let's just mouse over this, make sure that raw is permissioned. Yes, it is. And then second permissions dot second permissions. And let's see what this is. This is just x. So dot x is equal to false. And let's give this a run. As you see, we got 2 records. And if you remember, 3 of those were true that I just quickly created, and 2 of those were false. These were the 2 that were false. So as you can see, we can go arbitrarily deep into extraordinarily nested structures very, very easily, simply by keeping in mind dot indexing, where basically we have the parent key dot the child key dot that child's key dot that child's key, all the way until you get what you're finally looking for. And you can go arbitrarily deep, doesn't really matter. But all right, that is our 4th example. Why don't we go to our 5th example, and I'll show you how this structure that I'm doing can work if you wanted to pull out multiple keys instead of just one key, and if you wanted to make use of what I just talked about in my previous video, if you guys haven't had a chance to check it out, iterators and aggregators, which sort of adds another level of complexity to this whole thing. But all right, in this case, we have products sold in the last month. Let's right-click, press run this module only. Let's look at the array. What do we have here? We have an array with items called prod-001, name wireless headphones, category electronics, price, in stock, true sales info, sold in last month, true, number of sold, last sale. This is sort of the structure of this. You can imagine this is like some e-commerce store. Now, what we're looking to do is we're looking to grab all the products that are sold in the last month. But we don't just want to pull one thing. Like before, we were just pulling the email, or we were just pulling the ID. We actually want to pull 2 things. So I want to pull the prod-002, and I also want to pull the price. So I want to do 2 things, not just one. So how exactly would you do that with mapping? Well, fortunately, mapping only allows you to pull 1 thing, right? It doesn't work. You can't just, you can't type in 2 things here. I wish you could. That'd make my life a lot easier, but you can't. From array, I want to pull ID and name where, I don't know, sales info dot sold in last month is equal to true. Like, how great would it be if you could just click run once and then this would output everything you need? Well, it doesn't. So what you have to do instead is you have to do a workaround where instead of setting one variable, you're actually setting multiple, and then you aggregate them all together into the target object that you're looking for. Does that sound like French to you? Great. French is a beautiful language. I'm thankful. No, no problem. We're going to solve this. I'm going to go to tools. Instead of set a variable, I'm going to set multiple variables. Okay. And what I'm going to do is my very first variable name is going to be ID. Then my second variable name is going to be price. For the first variable, I'm going to map this array. So from this array, I want the ID where sales info dot sold in last month is set to true. Okay. Now, if I just give this a run, what happened here? Well, our ID array is filled with 3 entries, product 1, 3, and 5, just because those are the ones that happen to correspond to the logic that I put out. The price is empty because I didn't fill it in. But notice how essentially we're going to be getting an array. So what if we got an array of IDs and then an array of prices? How would we combine them? Well, I'll show you. Very, very nifty little trick. Let's do the same thing for price now. And now that we know our mnemonic, this is going to be super straightforward. We're looking from array to grab the price where sales info dot sold in last month is set to true. It'll be the exact same logic as this. I'm going to click OK, give this a run. Then I'm going to look at what's in here. We have product 001, $79.99, product 03, $39.99, product 05, $12.99. And now let's say I need to have both of this data. I need to combine them somehow. All right. So unfortunately, I had a call that I had to deal with, and it has taken me a little bit longer than I expected. However, let me walk you through what the logic to actually get this done looks like. And then you can actually just copy the little snippet of code essentially, and then just reuse it anytime that you want to create the same sort of structure that I've done. So we have the product sold in the last month over here. If I run this, you see that we generate the array that we talked about before, right? With sales info, sold in the last month, all that stuff. And then basically what we're doing is with the set multiple variables module, we have variable names, so IDs and prices. So now we're deconstructing, or we're mapping 2 separate arrays now with 1 item in each, but those 2 items correspond to each other, line item by line item. We are then feeding in one of these into an iterator. Now, the cool part about feeding something into an iterator is that when you feed it into an iterator, you get what's called if I run this, you'll see, you get the bundle order position. So 1, 2, and 3. And this bundle order position is going to allow us to track which element in the array of the other array we can use to index the specific item. So again, this is some pretty advanced stuff. You don't need to know how to do this in order to do most of what you can do in make.com, but I figured that I'd show you guys. Next up, we use what's called a text aggregator. The way that a text aggregator works, if you've watched my previous video, it should be reasonably straightforward, but you are going through every item in the array, and then you are sticking them all together in text. So what I've done is I've created my own JavaScript object notation. JavaScript object notation is just a left curly brace, then quotes around whatever the value variable name is. So this is the key, right? So just like we had ID here, this is the exact same thing. So ID, and then a colon, and then, oops, I just moved some quotes around. Can't move quotes around. And then we got quotes, and then I'm pulling in the value from the iterator. So prod-001, prod-003, prod-005. And then for price, what I'm doing is I'm putting in this price value, but then I'm actually indexing it by the bundle order position. Now, I think this is a glitch or something. This should say 1. It says prod-001. But basically what I'm going to be doing here is I'm going to be going, the first time this runs is going to say 1. The second time it runs is going to say 2. The third time it runs is going to say 3. So it's going to pull out the first price in the first run, the second price in the second run, the third price in the third run. And what happens after that is we then feed that all into a parse JSON module, which then looks like this. This is the thing that I'm basically feeding in, essentially. This array, and then we have the whole string. And the logic to get that done, I'll show you. And, afterwards we get the prod 1 with the price, prod 2 with the price, or prod 3 with the price, prod 5 with the price. The logic to get that done is this formula as follows. It's curly brace, quote, array, then another quote, and then comma, then colon, and then a square bracket, and then this piece of text, join split text split by the presence of this comma, and then join by the presence of this comma. This basically just gets rid of a couple of additional commas. And then we wrap it in a square bracket and then a curly brace. I understand that this, if you're unfamiliar with JSON, probably means nothing to you, but you can also just copy this and just use this as sort of like a back pocket sort of hack anytime you want to do the similar sort of function that I'm showing here, which is again, to take data, map several different keys, and then stick those keys and values together into a new array after all. So I hope that makes sense. Hope you guys enjoy that. That is the wrong screen. This is the right screen. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you guys have any questions about how this process works, feel free to just drop a comment down below. I think that we leveled up the complexity of the mapping quite steadily over the course of this. So I think everybody here should probably know. If I could just summarize this whole thing, it would be, remember the mnemonic that we talked about at the beginning? From A, I want B, where C is equal to D. If you just keep that in your mind and repeat that 5 or 10 times over the course of the next few minutes, the next time you have any sort of mapping problem, you will take care of it with ease. Aside from that, if you could do me a favor and like, subscribe, do all that YouTube stuff that I love when people do, and I will see y'all in the next video. Thanks so much. Cheers.